Listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or even turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Christmas Eve, December 23rd. Your readers today are Lori and
Lita.
We're going to start, of course, as we always do, with the weather. It's going to be cloudy today with a little rain, which we've already seen this morning, and a high of 40. Low clouds tonight with a low of 30. Rather cloudy tomorrow. Dry for holiday travel, though. High of 34. Thursday, Christmas Day, low clouds with a high of 36. Friday, Boxing Day, snow, sleet, and freezing rain is possible. High of 32. And on the weekends, there's going to be highs in the 40s, low 40s, and some clouds and more rain. If you're looking at the Skywatch, the sunrise is 7:44 a.m. this morning, sunset tonight at 4:45, moonrise 10:25 a.m., and moonset today at 8:17. If you want to know where it was extra hot yesterday, it was Brownsville, Texas with a high of 86 and the low -8 in Crane Lake, Minnesota. The Niagara River, the winds are west-southwest for 8 to 16 knots today. Waters with a light chop, visibility less than 3 miles at times, in rain. Otherwise clear with a water temperature of 41.
And starting on the front page, prosecutors deny grand jury missteps in Farrell's retaliation case. Federal prosecutors Monday defended the felony indictment against those whom they believed play a role in the fatal drug overdose of federal witness Crystal Quinn. The grand jury process was conducted appropriately over 5 months, and there was simply no prosecutorial misconduct by prosecutors sitting at this table, Assistant U.S. Attorney Joseph Trippi said in court as the judge heard arguments on whether defense attorneys should receive transcripts of the grand jury proceedings. In a court ruling unsealed last month, U.S. Magistrate Judge Jeremiah J. McCarthy described the indictment against Peter Geraci, Jr. and the other defendants as replete with misstatements and incomplete descriptions of the laws they are accused of breaking. McCarthy, who reviewed the grand jury transcripts, raised grave doubts about the independence of the grand jury that returned the 28-count second superseding indictment in January of 2024. Assistant U.S. Attorney Casey Schallbeck called the magistrate's ruling contrary to law and clearly erroneous. Defense lawyers countered that McCarthy's ruling was not erroneous, arguing that his decision to release a limited excerpt of the grand jury transcripts should stand so they can address issues concerning the validity of the indictment. He properly balanced the need for grand jury secrecy with the goal of ensuring a just result in the case, Mark Foti and Cheryl Myers-Booth, lawyers for Peter Geraci Jr., said in a court filing. Quinn, a former exotic dancer who had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in the bribery, sex, and drug trafficking case against Geraci, the owner of Farrell's Gentlemen's Club, died from a fentanyl overdose in the summer of 2023 before the case went to trial. The grand jury superseding indictment accuses 4 people of conspiring to kill Quinn. In addition to Geraci, they include Simon Gogolak, the man who called 911 to report Quinn's death in his Wellsville home, John Ehrman, a manager of Farrell's, whom prosecutors call a national leader of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, and Wellsville resident Howard Hinkle Jr., among the last to be seen with Quinn. The grand jury indictment accused Gogolak of intentionally giving Quinn a lethal dose of fentanyl. All 4 pleaded not guilty and remained jailed. 2 others are accused of making false and evasive statements to law enforcement about Quinn's death. Michael Rancone, who was the president of the Rare Breed Motorcycles Club, Wellsville chapter, and Frank Knight, a Wellsville resident who lived across the street from Gogolak. Chief U.S. District Judge Elizabeth Wolford is now handling all of the retaliation cases preceding herself, so even though McCarthy raised doubts about the superseding indictment, Wolford will decide how to deal with them. Prosecutors, in an appeal, asked Wohlford to vacate McCarthy's finding that the government misled the grand jury, as well as any implied finding of prosecutorial misconduct, and set aside his order to disclose the transcripts. Grand jury material is normally kept secret. The reasons the magistrate judge cited for disclosing the grand jury transcripts were not even the ones previously offered by defense lawyers, Chalbeck said. His legal rationales failed to give any basis to dismiss the indictment, and his facts of purported prosecutorial misconduct do not exist, Chalbeck said. What's more, the defendants failed to demonstrate a particularized need for disclosure as required by law, she said. At no point have defendants identified a clear violation of the rules, Chalbeck said in court. In court Monday, Fody told Wohlford that McCarthy reviewed the grand jury transcripts and found that the grand jury acted as a proverbial rubber stamp for the government. Fody asked for the grand jury instructions to be released to the defense and to allow the prior grand jury related filings cited in McCarthy's decision to be made part of the public record and accessible on the docket. Only a redacted version of McCarthy's order is publicly available, and one of the redactions blacked out how many minutes it took for the grand jury to deliberate and vote on the 28 count in the 58-page indictment. Fody said McCarthy found the grand jury's independence may have been compromised by the lack of accurate instructions, the failure to instruct on necessary legal definitions, and the short time the grand jurors considered the indictment written entirely by the government. Hinkle's lawyers said the government has the advantageous position of already possessing the grand jury material. Releasing the grand jury materials is the only remedy to address the shortfalls raised by the magistrate judge, said Daniel Henry and Frank Bogolsky, Hinkle's lawyers. To rule otherwise will force the defense to have to make its argument on substance issues and dismissal from an unlevel playing ground with the government, they said in a court filing. Wohlford reserved decision on whether to release the transcripts. She asked prosecutors what should happen when judges find something obviously improper happens during a grand jury proceeding, but without defense making a particularized motion for a remedy. They have no recourse, Wohlford asked. That strikes me as odd. But she noted that the defense lawyers did not cite a case supporting their argument that the government's lack of legal instructions to grand jurors merited releasing transcripts and dismissing an indictment. Attorney Donald Thompson, who represents John Ehrman, suggested maybe there are no judges as brave as Your Honor to have reached such a decision. It is not a matter of bravery, Wohlford replied, but of following the law. It is understandable there is scant case law related to the issue, Fody said, because it is so rare that defense attorneys would see the transcripts of legal instructions to grand jurors. The cases don't exist because the government controls the playing field, Fody told Wohlford.
And Christmas is back in Bethlehem, but joy and peace are lacking. A marching band played carols, a choir sang hymns, and the lights adorning a giant evergreen blinked on as Christmas tentatively returned to Bethlehem's manger square. For the past 2 years, Palestinians in the Israeli-occupied West Bank have largely avoided public celebrations of Christmas out of sensitivity to the war in the Gaza Strip. This has meant an absence of the traditional tree lighting ceremonies, musical performances, and elaborate, blindingly illuminated decorations. With a fragile ceasefire largely holding, Christians in the West Bank, who make up less than 2% of the population there, are trying to revive the holiday spirit. In Bethlehem, the biblical birthplace of Jesus, the streets were adorned with banners in Arabic and English, quoting from the Bible's book of Isaiah. "Arise, shine, for your light has come." Yet the city's recent tree lighting ceremony was a small bright spot in an otherwise somber moment. The past year has seen a surge of Israeli extremist settler attacks on Palestinian communities across the West Bank. That reached a record high in October with 271 attacks, or about 8 a day, according to the UN Office for the Coordination of Palestinian Affairs, which began keeping records back in 2006. Earlier this year, the Israeli government authorized the largest settlement expansion in decades, and on Sunday, the cabinet approved a proposal to authorize 19 more settlements. The United Nations and the Internal Court of Justice say that all Israeli settlements in the West Bank violate international law. In the Bethlehem area, home to one of the largest Christian Palestinian communities, at least 59 Palestinians were injured in settler attacks from the start of the year through November, according to United Nations data, a figure that is higher than for all of 2024. Meir Kanawati, the city's mayor, said the recent Christmas event was both a celebration and a statement of hope. We want peace. We want life, he said, adding that peace was needed so we can continue living in our cities and in Palestine. Beyond its religious significance, Christmas is important for Bethlehem's economy. Without the seasonal celebrations, the city's tourism industry would wither, according to Yusuf Handel, 47, a barista at a cafe just off the main square. It brings out what the city can offer, he said, but I can't say that the joy of the Christmas spirit is felt. That was the mood among many Christian communities in the West Bank this Christmas, amid modest celebrations and muted merrymaking. Many settled for a theme of resilience instead. It feels great to be able to see smiles and decorations and lights up in our streets, said Yusuf Weiss, 23, who was making donuts at Ramallah's Christmas market. It's a way the Palestinians say, we are here. In Taiba, the last all-Christian Palestinian village in the West Bank, community leaders set up a new Christmas market, hoping to replicate the success of the town's annual Oktoberfest-style beer festival and create an island of light amid the darkness of recent months. Yet, on December 3rd, the night before the Christmas market opened, Fouad Mouadi, the co-owner of an ecotourism project near Taiba, said he heard bulldozers on his property. The next morning, Mouadi said he found a trail leading through his land to a settler's outpost. Mouadi filed a complaint with Palestinian authorities. A Palestinian official confirmed that the incident was registered and under review. We are trying to catch a breath to be able to go on, Mouadi said at the opening of the Christmas market. Later that night, in the eastern part of the village, 2 cars were set on fire, according to Sanad Salih, an activist who is part of a local group that monitors settler activity. The Israeli military said that it had sent forces to the area after receiving a report about several Israeli civilians setting fire to cars, but that none of the perpetrators were found. Still, the Tabeth market was resplendent, with a choir singing songs of peace and vendors selling waffles, shawarma, and chocolates. Renee Tay, a school counselor from Tabeth, who lives in Ramallah, said she had returned to her hometown for Christmas, hoping the market would brighten the mood. It still feels heavy, she said, but added that she thought the festivities could lift the spirits of local children who for years had known only holidays weighed down by politics. This year, they're able to express the birth of Christ as a time of joy and a call for continuity. For 2 years, the nativity scene at Tabah's Church of Christ the Redeemer showed Jesus lying not on a bed of straw, but on a pile of rubble. This year, as a gesture of moving forward, the traditional nativity is back. We need to renew our land and our lives, said Father Bashar Fadoleh, the parish priest, in a recent sermon. He called for peace and for security in Tabah, and hoped that the people from all over the world could visit the village where Jesus was.
And you are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 14 minutes past the hour. And in an article, Ozempic's miracle image takes a hit on dementia trial. Over the past few years, scientists have learned that Ozempic and related drugs developed to treat type 2 diabetes can improve the health of the liver, kidney, and heart. Is it such a stretch to think they could also treat neurological disorders? Perhaps, at least when it comes to Alzheimer's disease. This month, scientists from Novo Nordisk, the company that makes Ozempic, presented data at an Alzheimer's research conference showing that the compound in the drug had failed to slow the progression of early Alzheimer's in 2 clinical trials. To some researchers, the results are a reason to temper enthusiasm around this class of medication and its potential to treat some brain-related conditions. It's a little bit sobering, and we have to tone down the wonder drug discussion and be very realistic, said Daniel Drucker, a researcher at Lunenfeld Tannenbaum Research Institute at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto, and one of the first scientists to study medications like Ozempic. Drucker has consulted for Novo Nordisk. Others remain optimistic that the medication holds potential. It was very disappointing, let's put it that way, in terms of what we were anticipating, said Dr. Paul Edison, a professor of neurosurgery at Imperial College London, who led another study testing a similar drug to treat Alzheimer's and has also consulted for Novo Nordisk. But, he added, the fundamental theory is still quite sound. Medications like Ozempic mimic a naturally occurring hormone called glucagon, like peptide 1 or a GLP-1, which helps regulate blood sugar and appetite. GLP-1 is primarily secreted from the intestines, but the brain also produces some of the hormone. Scientists have long known that GLP-1 and other gut hormones have positive effects on cognition, said Dr. Williams Banks, a professor of gerontology and geriatric medicine at the University of Washington, who has been studying the hormone for decades. GLP-1 medications cause weight loss in part because they act on areas of the brain related to reward and satiety. Some are also able to cross the blood-brain barrier, reaching parts of the brain that play an important role in memory. These drugs may affect brain health indirectly too. One of the prevailing theories is that they tamp down inflammation throughout the body, including in the brain, and that could help lower the risk for dementia. Research in mice has underscored the drug's potential benefits, finding that GLP-1 medications can prevent or even reverse cognitive impairments and signs of Alzheimer's disease in the animals, including the accumulation of the protein tau, a hallmark of the condition. However, there is a long history of drugs successfully treating dementia in rodents, but failing to do so in humans. Early research on people was promising. Results from several epidemiological studies found that people with type 2 diabetes who took Ozempic or similar drugs had a lower risk of developing dementia than those on other types of diabetes medications. And in a small clinical trial led by Edison, another GLP-1 drug slightly slowed cognitive decline in people with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. So why did the trial fail? Well, the two clinical trials included roughly 3,800 people who were diagnosed with either mild cognitive impairment or early dementia and had signs of amyloid plaques in their brains, another hallmark of Alzheimer's. Half the participants took a pill form of semaglutide, the substance in Ozempic, and the other half took a placebo. The researchers hoped that over the course of 2 years, the patients taking semaglutide wouldn't experience as much cognitive decline as those taking a placebo, and maybe they wouldn't progress from one stage of dementia to the next. But in the data presented at the Alzheimer's conference, there was no difference between the two groups. The researchers also looked at biomarkers in the patient's blood and spinal fluid and did note some differences. The participants who received semaglutide showed a decrease in both tau and inflammation, but that decrease was probably too small to have the corresponding benefit on the cognition that we had hoped for, said Dr. Jeffrey Cummings, a professor of brain science at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, during a conference presentation. Scientists don't know for certain why the trials failed, but they have a few guesses. The main one is that the medication wasn't very effective at getting into the participants' brains. That could be because the semaglutide molecule was too big to deeply penetrate the blood-brain barrier. These agents were developed for type 2 diabetes, said Nigel Greig, a senior investigator at the National Institute of Health, who has studied these drugs for neurodegenerative disorders. It's a systematic disorder, so they really weren't designed to go into the brain. Or it could be that the pill form of the medication was less effective because not as much of the drug enters the bloodstream when it is taken orally compared with an injectable version. How much actually it gets into the brain is quite debatable, Edison said. That may very well be one of the reasons why it didn't work. Scientists understand nearly nothing about how the pill formulation of semaglutide might be able to access the brain, said Carolina Skibica, a neuroscientist at Hotchkiss Brain Institute at the University of Calgary. And that's a big reason why I wouldn't necessarily expect miracles out of this treatment, she said. It's almost possible that this class of medication could still work as a form of prevention, but not as a treatment, Edison said. They're going to be very effective drugs for certain types of things, and we have to learn that those are and maximize the opportunities. But he cautioned, there are no drugs for everything.
Starting over, Buffalo Public Schools' process for closure has been a fiasco. And this is an editorial. Buffalo Public Schools were right in deciding to pause on school closure work until the new board arrives. Right now, things are a mess. Word on the street that the 2 schools recommended by a committee to close schools includes D'Youville Porter Campus School Number 3, a pre-kindergarten through 8th grade bilingual school on the city's west side, sent shockwaves throughout the community. The other school recommended to Superintendent Pascal Mubinga is said to be School 90. But the kerfuffle created by the mere mention of School 3 is on another scale, and for good reason. As reported by Ben Suimoto, the purpose for closing 2 schools effective for the 26-27 school year is to save about $10 million over 4 years as part of the school district's right-sizing effort. It also includes reducing job positions and finding new revenue streams. The entire community understood a couple of schools would close, but schools 3 seemed to come out of nowhere. Even some members of the school closure committee were caught off guard. For example, committee member Harper Bishop said in a lengthy statement that the first closure the committee voted on almost unanimously was thoughtful and consistent with the parameters. But according to Bishop, the second school was not. Bishop said he was alarmed by how a majority of the committee decided on School 3. And although the district confirmed on Friday afternoon the committee's 2 recommendations for the first time, officials emphasized that they weren't final. Yet, the fact that School 3 even came into view raises important questions. Was this choice, as multiple committee members suggested, the result of politicking, which suggests that machinations behind the scenes led to the recommendation of School 3? If so, who was pulling those strings? Why suggest a school that, as Bishop said, some within the community majority lacked basic information about, including its name and location, as well as the reasons for choosing it, even after the final vote had been taken? However, School 3 landed in the crosshairs. Those behind the mood had to have anticipated the strong West Side reaction. Leaders in the community point out the harm that would be done to the surrounding Porter Avenue and Niagara Street neighborhoods, not to mention the significance of closing a school that educates about 80% Hispanic Latino students. Casimiro D. Rodriguez Sr., president and founder of the Hispanic Heritage Council of Western New York, Incorporated, and Assemblymember Jonathan D. Rivera, a Buffalo Public Schools graduate, and whose 149th district includes the West Side, have expressed their warranted dismay. Rodriguez noted that the closing a bilingual school is not the answer. Rivera, troubled by a process he was told lacked transparency, pointed out the dense, well-populated, walkable community. Thus far, the district's current process for recommending school closures seems opaque and close to chaotic. It is best to pause that work until a new school board arrives and convenes its first board meeting of the year, and that will be on January the 5th. At that time, the new board should demand more transparency in the closure process and better answers to the community concerns over which schools land on the chopping block and why they land there.
And in the opinions column, in Owens, conservatives have created a monster that they can't control. This past week, Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, traveled to Nashville, Tennessee to meet with Candace Owens, a podcaster and premier purveyor of conspiracy theories about her husband's murder. If the summit was meant to persuade Owens to back off her speculations, it failed. On Thursday, Owens had on her show a man who claimed to have seen Erica Kirk at an Army base the day before Kirk's assassination, implying that Erica was part of the plot against her husband. That plot also involves, in Owens' telling, the French Foreign Legion, the federal government, and leaders of Turning Point, Kirk's organization, all somehow masterminded by demonic Zionists. Owens' musings are unhinged, but Erica Kirk's trip, brokered by conservative star Megyn Kelly, demonstrates that they've become too influential for right-wing leaders to ignore. Kelly, a former Fox News host who's never been known for her outre views, has refused to denounce Owens. The aftermath of Kirk's assassination should have been a unifying moment for the right. The fact of the case, accused gunman Tyler Robinson is said to have had a trans partner and was angry about Kirk's demonization of sexual minorities, would have been easy for conservatives to exploit. But Robinson evidently wasn't a grand enough enemy for some on today's right, which is increasingly built on conspiracies and the content they generate. Kirk's killing has precipitated a bitter, squalid, internecine feud. Today, the conservatives movement is in serious danger, Ben Shapiro said Thursday on the opening night of Turning Point's America Fest conference, the first since Kirk's death. That danger comes not just from the left, Shapiro said, but from charlatans who claim to speak in the name of principle, but actually traffic in conspiracism, and dishonesty. He went on to denounce Owens by name, as well as Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon. Shapiro, however, doesn't have the power to excommunicate Owens. As of this writing, she is 9th on Spotify's podcast charts, ahead of every other right-wing podcast except Carlson's. This is partly about conservatives creating a monster they can't control. Owens has been saying nutty things for a long time, and in 2019 she left her job as communication director of Turning Point after arguing that Adolf Hitler's real sin was globalism, not nationalism. Rather than ostracize her, powerful conservative organizations cultivated her. Republicans invited her to testify before Congress about why white nationalism wasn't a problem. In 2020, Shapiro hired her at the Daily Wire, his media company, which is where she began her podcast. They split in 2024 over her increasingly anti-Semitic rhetoric. People on the right are now surprised by her willingness to say outrageous things about them. Owens' rise and the damage she's done to her allies also offers a warning about the danger of the influencer politics that conservatives have excelled at. Since the 2024 election, Democrats have lamented the advantage Republicans have gained in new media, including long-form podcast, webcast, and vertical video platforms like TikTok. Liberals should try to figure out how to become competitive in all these mediums, since many Americans rely on them to learn about the world. The problem is that the influencer ecosystem rewards those who promise access to suppressed, esoteric truths, making viewers feel as if they're part of a real-life melodrama. The algorithms are optimized for illiberalism. I was struck by the reference in Owens' podcast this past week to the mommy sleuths and investigators in her audience. She was announcing plans to provide these amateur detectives with photos of Charlie Kirk's rental car, which somehow, in her telling, pointed to problems with the investigation of his death. It demonstrated one of her chief innovations. She packages conspiracy theories in the convention of true crime, allowing people following along on their screens to participate in the search for answers. QAnon once offered its adherents a similar sense that they were taking part in solving a great mystery. Lately, however, that movement's energy seems to have dissipated. There was always a strange optimistic streak for QAnon, since it's posited that heroic white hats were working behind the scenes to set the world right. As one popular meme put it, patriots are in control. But now, Donald Trump is firmly back in power, and no golden age is at hand. Instead, we've seen Trump struggling to keep the case files of his friend Jeffrey Epstein secret. For some former true believers, disillusionment is setting in. Marjorie Taylor Greene referenced the QAnon movement's tropes when she announced her resignation last month. There is no plan to save the world or a 4D chess game being played. Just asking questions, positing vague conspiracy, raving like Alex Jones about secret confederacies that control your life, none of it makes your life better, Shapiro said in his Americast speech. Unfortunately, when it comes to people trying to build an audience, he's wrong.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time is 29 minutes after the hour. How about that editorial cartoon, Lita?
Well, if you are a Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer person and the animated, you'll remember what Santa Claus and his wife looks like. And there's a picture of them at the table, and Santa's getting ready to eat, and he's very skinny. Very, very skinny. And his wife, Mrs. Claus, says, "Who ever heard of a skinny Santa? Enough with the Ozempic."
And in my view, a double surprise from Santa Claus. When I was 12 years old, our next door neighbor gave us 2 pairs of girls' hockey skates that they had outgrown. They were pretty rough, with thick blades and not quite white, but I was thrilled nonetheless. As part of a large family of 6 kids, the cost of new skates was prohibitive. I put them on every day and walked them all through the house in them, practicing to get a feel for balance and stability until the temperature outside dropped to freezing. I'd hang onto the back of my father's recliner while he watched golf on TV and practice skating movements to my family's amusement. My best friend, Dolores, and I would skate on anything that was frozen, leaky gutters in the driveway, even the pond at Kleinhans Music Hall. We were happy and we had lots of fun. One day, a week before Christmas, Dolores' uncle was driving us to the artificial ice rink at Humboldt Park. That afternoon, my father walked into our small dining room with a box. He said, "I know you believe in Santa Claus, and I hope you're not disappointed, but I think that you would like these now." I opened it, and there were the most beautiful ice skates I had ever seen. Pure white figure skates with black heels and blades that were gleaming. I couldn't believe it. My very own figure skates. I put them on right away, a perfect fit, and couldn't wait to get on the ice. When I did, I was so proud and happy. I felt like Donna Atwood in Peter Pan, whom my mother took me to see at the Ice-Capades when I was 10. I later even got black pom-poms for the tops of the toes. So now, what about Santa Claus? By the time I got them, I was almost 13, probably older than most kids to still believe. I read that the average age for children to separate from the Santa myth is 8 or 9 years of age. Some children will learn that Santa is not real from an older sibling, friends, or school pals. In my case, my siblings never said they didn't believe or that I shouldn't, so I held on to Santa Claus. The spirit of Christmas and Santa were an extension of our religious and cultural beliefs through kind and generous actions handed down through the generations. Also, I think that imaginary and pretend undertakings are an important part of a child's development as it creates an avenue for creativity and imagination. As an adult, I think there is something profoundly beautiful about the way the world is seen through the eyes of a child at this time of year. They truly see the magic that the season offers us through the joy and hope they experience as they await Christmas. I was waiting anxiously for that magic in Santa when my father presented the ice skates to me early. Did I feel a loss or a betrayal? Maybe for a few moments, but that quickly evaporated as I was too excited to get to the rink and to swirl around the ice wearing my beautiful new skates, given to me through love and the foresight of my parents, who knew when a child has a true interest and desire to learn something. Our family traditions and childhood memories remained the same, and in my case, growing up didn't mean losing that magic. It reinforced the love and trust I have in my parents. I don't know, I'm a still believer. How about you, Leda?
Yes, I am. I am indeed. Okay, moving over to Parmi Olson. AI is much too good at political persuading. For a while last year, scientists offered hope that artificial intelligence would make a positive contribution to democracy. They showed that chatbots could address conspiracy theories across social media, challenging misinformation with the stream of facts in conversation. But 2 new studies suggest that the latest AI models are getting even better at persuading people at the expense of the truth. The trick is using a tactic known as Gish galloping, named after American creationist Duane Gish. It refers to rapid-style speech where one interlocutor bombards the other with a stream of facts and stats that become difficult to pick apart. When language models like GPT-40 were told to try persuading someone about healthcare funding or immigration policy by focusing on facts and information, they'd generate about 25 claims during a 10-minute interaction. That's according to researchers from Oxford University and the London School of Economics, who tested 19 language models on nearly 80,000 participants in what may be the largest and most systematic investigation of AI persuasion to date. The bots became far more persuasive, according to the finding published in the journal Science. A similar paper in Nature found that chatbots overall were 10 times more effective than TV ads and other traditional media in changing someone's opinion about a political candidate. But the Science paper found when chatbots were prompted to overwhelm users with information, their factual accuracy declined to 62% from 78% in the case of GPT-4. Rapid-fire debating has become something of a phenomenon on YouTube over the last few years. It produces dramatic arguments that have made politics more engaging and accessible for younger voters, but also foment increased radicalism and spread misinformation with their focus on entertainment and gotcha moments. Could Gish galloping AI make things worse? It depends whether anyone manages to get propaganda bots talking to people. A campaign advisor for an environmentalist group or political candidate can't change ChatGPT itself, now used by over 900 million people weekly. But they can fine-tune the underlying language model and integrate it onto a website or conduct a WhatsApp campaign where they ping voters and lure them into conversation. A moderately resourced campaign could probably set this up in a few weeks with computing costs of around $50,000, but they may struggle to get voters or the public to have a prolonged conversation with their bot. The Science study showed that the 10-minute conversation that took around 7 turns that has a real and lasting impact. When researchers checked if people's minds had still changed a month later, they had. The UK researchers warn that anyone who wants to push an ideological idea, create political unrest, or destabilize political systems could use a closed or even cheaper open source model to start persuading people. And they demonstrate the disarming power of, where did we go here? Sorry, we lost the spot. AI to do so. But note that they had to pay people to join their persuasion study. Let's hope deploying such bots via websites and text messages outside the main gateways controlled by the likes of OpenAI and Alphabet Incorporated Google won't get the bad actors very far.
And back to national news, 60 Minutes pulls a story about Trump deportations. An internal CBS News battle over a 60-minute story critical of the Trump administration has exploded publicly, with a correspondent charging it was kept off the air for political reasons, and news chief Bari Weiss saying Monday the story did not advance the ball. 2 hours before airtime Sunday, CBS announced that the story where correspondent Sharon Alfonsi spoke to deportees who had been sent to El Salvador's notorious CECOT prison would not be part of the show. Weiss, the Free Press founder, named CBS News editor-in-chief in October, said it was her decision. The dispute puts one of journalism's most respected brands and a frequent target of President Trump back in the spotlight and amplifies questions about whether Weiss's appointment was a signal that CBS News was headed in a more Trump-friendly direction. Alfonsi, in an email sent to fellow 60 Minutes correspondents, said the story was factually correct and had been cleared by CBS lawyers and its standards division. But the Trump administration had refused to comment for the story, and Weiss wanted a greater effort made to get their point of view. In my view, pulling it now, after every rigorous internal check has been met, is not an editorial decision. It is a political one, Alfonsi wrote in the email. She did not immediately respond to requests for comments from the Associated Press. Alfonsi said in the email that interviews were sought with or questions directed to, sometimes both, the White House, the State Department, and Department of Homeland Security. Government silence is a statement, not a veto, Alfonsi wrote. Their refusal to be interviewed is a tactical maneuver designed to kill the story. If the administration's refusal to participate becomes a valid reason to spike a story, we have effectively handed them a kill switch for any reporting that they find inconvenient. Spike is a journalist's term for killing a story. But Weiss, in a statement, said that she looked forward to airing Alfonsi's piece when it is ready. Speaking Monday at the daily CBS News internal editorial call, Weiss was clearly angered by Alfonsi's memo. A transcript of Weiss's message was provided by CBS News. The only newsroom I'm interested in running is one in which we are able to have contentious disagreements about the thorniest editorial matters with respect and, crucially, where we assume the best intent of our colleagues, Weiss said. Anything else is completely unacceptable. She said that while Alfonsi's story presented a powerful testimony about torture at the CECOT prison, the New York Times and other outlets had already done similar work. To run a story on this subject 2 months later, we need to do more, she said, and this is 60 Minutes. We need to be able to get the principles on the record and on the camera. It wasn't clear whether Weiss's involvement in seeking administration comment was sought. She reportedly helped the newscast arrange interviews with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff this past fall to discuss Trump's Middle East peace efforts. Trump himself was interviewed by Norah O'Donnell on a 60 Minutes telecast that aired November the 2nd. Trump has been sharply critical of 60 Minutes. He refused to grant the show an interview prior to last fall's election, then sued the network over how it handled an interview with election opponent Kamala Harris. CBS's parent, Paramount Global, agreed to settle the lawsuit by paying Trump $16 million this past summer. More recently, Trump angrily reacted to correspondent Leslie Stahl's interview with Trump's former ally turned critic, Marjorie Taylor Greene. 60 Minutes was notably tough on Trump during the first months of his second term, particularly in stories done by correspondent Scott Pelley. In accepting an award from USC Annenberg earlier this month for his journalism, Pelley noted that the stories were aired last spring with absolute minimum of interference.
And in another voice, the Buffalo Water offers excellent quality by Gerald Kelly. Having served for 15 years at Erie County Water Authority, I noted the news's coverage of Buffalo's water's race against time to ensure that customers have safe drinking water. And to do this, the authority had to decide whether to add the chemical orthophosphate to their water. Buffalo Water began adding orthophosphate to its water in 1997. Orthophosphate inhibitors help protect both lead service lines and fixtures containing lead from corroding by the development of protective scale at the pipe fixture water interface. The combination of Buffalo Water's excellent and stable water quality, as well as the addition of an orthophosphate corrosion control inhibitory, has allowed Buffalo Water to consistently maintain lead levels below the federal required level. Buffalo Water has reduced its own lead level by 5 parts per billion, which is half of the new federal EPA lead level maximum of 10 ppb. On the issue of fluoride, we identified an antiquated fluoride feed system that required replacement with a safer and more effective wet fluoride system using fluorosilicic acid. Our fluoride studies were completed in 2016. Prior to the startup of the new fluoride system, we wanted to ensure there were no unintended consequences due to a required change in the fluoride chemical. Hence, we invested in a pipe loop to simulate corrosivity effects on household service lines and plumbing conditions. We hired the University at Buffalo, which performed the simulations using fluorosilicic acid. Due to the complexity of the new fluoride feed locations, we determined that a capital project would need to be undertaken. Bonds were floated and the fluoride feed locations were constructed and completed in 2024. Safe Fluoride began feeding into the Buffalo Water system in September of 24. But let me conclude by mentioning that in this time of high cost, Buffalo Water offers an affordability, amnesty, and assistance program. This program is designed for lower income ratepayers. It includes deferred payments, a water affordability discount, and a waiver of interest, penalties, and fees. And to apply, you can go to, this is all one word, getwaterwisebuffalo.org. Buffalo Water proudly works together with community-based organizations to ensure that water, Earth's greatest resource, is safe and accessible to everyone. Gerald Kelly is a recent retired member of the Buffalo Water Board. Lori?
And the project at DL&W Station is stuck in limbo amid a fight. The NFTA lacking funds for next steps and is at odds with the developer. When the Niagara Frontier Transportation Authority opened its new DL&W station this month to great fanfare, it was still far from complete. The lower level station itself, with its tracks, platform, and seating, was complete and greeted its first passenger train in decades. But 2 of the 3 planned ways of accessing the station, including a pedestrian bridge to KeyBank Center, were not done, and they won't be for months. Nor was the rest of the building, including the entire upper level, where NFTA officials have touted plans for an outdoor event space to host 2,500 people. And developer Samuel Savarino sought to transform the vast interior into a public market. That is because the rest of the DL&W project is facing financial shortfalls, engineering hurdles, and a dispute with one of its partners, Savarino. In fact, the NFTA can't even open the interior of the second floor without significant structural work that it doesn't have the funding for. And the shoreline underneath still has to be repaired and strengthened. But NFTA Executive Director Kimberly A. Minkle said she doesn't regret opening the station anyway. It's important for our riders, she said. We're all about options, giving our riders options. The station was ready to go. It was always anticipated that the station would be done first, before the Skywalk. Even so, those issues are raising questions about the NFTA's ability and financial capacity to restore the historical terminal along Buffalo's riverfront, although Minkle remains confident. We've completed a lot of very successful projects under my tenure, she said, citing the new train station, the Buffalo Niagara International Airport expansion, and the Bailey Avenue bus rapid transit system. I think we're up to the task, but that's not the end of it. There's a legal battle. The agency's decision last month to effectively fire Savarino as developer exposed a rift that has been brewing for months, but spilled into the open in the public battle. It now threatens to leave the future of that second floor mired in uncertainty. The 2 sides may head to the court as Savarino fights the agency's attempt to dismiss him, calling its arguments completely baseless, factually inaccurate, and legally false. NFTA officials said Savarino didn't do what he promised, misled the agency, and failed to provide a clear development plan. But Savarino, who claims to still have a binding signed agreement with the NFTA, said he wasn't required to submit a detailed plan and can't proceed with his project anyway until the NFA completes all of its stabilization work. And he notes that the NFTA is now years behind schedule and has admitted it doesn't have the money to finish. It is now quite apparent that the NFTA, years behind schedule and lacking the necessary funding to substantially progress the project, seeks to push the developer out, attorney Adam Walters wrote in a December 5th letter to the NFTA attorney Daniel Spitzer. Neither the NFTA nor Savarino would comment further. This has been 6 years of work. The NFTA began its effort in 2019 to bring DL&W back to public life, starting with what became a $57 million effort to redo the tracks and create the first extension of Metro Rail in almost 40 years, using state and federal dollars. It sought proposals in 2018 to redevelop the second floor, ultimately signing a pre-development agreement with Savarino back in 2020. The track work has taken 6 years because of the complexity of the project, delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and a fire that broke out in 2 cobblestone district buildings across the street, and that was on South Park Avenue. The station opened December 8th on the first floor. It replaced the former special events station that was torn down as part of the initiative to return vehicular traffic to Main Street. The main entrance is open from the River Walk path along the Buffalo River from Canal Side. Stabilizing the station. The structural work is another matter. The NFTA spent $8 million to repair a section of the shoreline underneath the terminal building that collapsed into the river back in July of 2022. But it still has another $26 million of work to stabilize the rest of the shoreline along the building based on recommendations from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Another $4 million of work will follow in 2027. There is also seismic work that needs to be done to shore up the columns and structural support for the second floor interior space. That is about another $30 million of improvements for which the agency lacks the money. The full development project is very large and complex, and to complete it, we will need an additional investment, Tenorus said. Officials are working with engineers to see if there's a way to do it more economically while still complying with building codes, Minkle said.
And Trump apparently has riled the Denmark people by naming an envoy to Greenland. Officials in Denmark and Greenland were furious Monday that President Trump had appointed a special envoy to Greenland, part of his efforts to take over the semi-autonomous Danish territory. Trump announced on social media late Sunday that he was appointing Governor Jeff Landry of Louisiana, a political ally, to the position. Denmark's foreign minister quickly criticized the move as totally unacceptable and said he would summon the U.S. ambassador in Copenhagen for an explanation. It appears to be the first time the United States had appointed a special envoy to Greenland. That puts the island of fewer than 60,000 inhabitants in a small group of foreign policy priorities, including Ukraine and the Middle East, for which Trump has appointed trusted allies. Landry quickly made it clear that he understood what Trump wanted from him, writing on social platform X, "It's an honor to serve you in this volunteer position to make Greenland a part of the U.S." Most of Greenland lies within the Arctic Circle, where world powers are competing for control of the top of the world to access untapped natural resources and emerging shipping corridors. Greenland has critical minerals that have attracted the interest of top officials in the Trump administration, and has served as a base for U.S. military operations during World War II and the Cold War. There is still a remote U.S. base on the island's northern side. In his post on Truth Social, Trump wrote that Jeff understands how essential Greenland is to our national security. But the appointment drew condemnation from Greenland and further deteriorated the relationship between the United States and Denmark, what used to be close allies. You cannot annex other countries, not even for invoking international security. Greenland belongs to the Greenlanders, and the United States must not take over Greenland. Nielsen added in a statement on Facebook that the appointment may sound big, but doesn't change anything for us at home. We decide our future ourselves, Nielsen said. Denmark has exercised varying forms of control over Greenland for centuries and absorbing it into its kingdom in 1953. But today, Greenland manages its own domestic affairs with the budget subsidized up to 60% by Denmark, which also manages its defense and foreign policy. Many of Greenland's leaders support independence, but differ on how soon they should happen and whether to build a closer relationship with the United States. The Danish government has twice this year summoned U.S. diplomats to complain about reports that the U.S. was spying and running a covert influence campaign in Greenland. This month, in a first for the Danish government, Denmark's military intelligence said that shifts in U.S. policy were generating new uncertainties for Denmark's security. The appointment of a special envoy could put pressure on Haury, a former executive at PayPal, who is considered close to Trump. And in November, Haury dodged a question from journalists about whether the U.S. would ever take Greenland by force, but he pledged cooperation. Landry, a Republican who was elected Louisiana's governor in 2023, has spent his first term projecting toughness and loyalty to Trump. The president often calls Landry a great governor. Danish officials and analysts said that while the U.S. has previously appointed envoys for the entire Arctic region, Landry would be the first special envoy just for Greenland.
On the lighter side, let's talk about your horoscope. Happy birthday for Tuesday, December 23rd. You are spirited and willing to lead people down the best path. You are committed. You are resourceful. This is a successful year for you because you will get recognition for your past efforts. If you're Aries, enjoy your interactions with friends and groups today. You're eager to explore ideas, see new places, meet new faces. Tonight, it's time to socialize. Taurus, you should know that you are high visibility today, which means some people might know personal details about your private life. Ooh, be aware of this in case you have to do damage control. Tonight, show respect. Gemini, this is a chatty day, and you'll be in your glory because someone you know will be interesting and informative. Tonight, make some plans. Cancer, this is a good day for mental work because you will be more attentive to details. Whatever you do, you will do it carefully and you will do it well. Tonight, check your paperwork and your banking. Leo, you're more in touch with your feelings today and the feelings of people you encounter, especially younger people and children. Tonight, you just have to listen. Virgo, this is a productive day at work for you because your mind is sharp and you are patient enough to pay attention to the details. Tonight, be even more productive. Libra, today you're pleased with yourself, which is why you'll enjoy schmoozing with everyone. Romance will flourish. Tonight you get to relax. Scorpio, two different energies are at play today. In one way, you would like to relax at home and keep a low profile. Wouldn't we all? Take it easy among familiar surroundings. Tonight, take it easy. Sagittarius, the moon is dancing with Mercury in your sign, boosting the tempo of your activity today. This is why you'll spend time talking to others. Tonight, you will learn something. Capricorn, you are an astute thinker and a good planner, and today, some behind-the-scenes research might yield ways to boost your income or find a better-paying job. Tonight, check your money. Aquarius, this is a strong day for you because the moon is in your sign and it's dancing with Mercury, encouraging lighthearted conversations with people because tonight you're strong. Finally, Pisces, you make a great impression on others today, which is why this is a good time to talk to bosses and authority figures. Tonight is time for privacy.
And as part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, you can call us at 716-821-5555. Again, that's 716-821-5555. Bernard E. Bauman, Jr., Cheryl Goldstone, Nee Meyer, Leon Skolnick, John Toward IV, Lamont, Jean Weinstein, Nee Costuros, Cheryl M. Rossi, Nee Cummings, Mark Solars. And again, if you need further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555.
And in Florida, attorneys urge a judge to visit a detention site. This is Orlando. Attorneys for detainees at an immigration detention center in the Florida Everglades, known as Alligator Alcatraz, want a federal judge to make an unscheduled in-person visit to the facility to see firsthand if they are getting sufficient access to their lawyers. Attorneys asked U.S. District Judge Sherry Polster Chappell on Friday to make the visit within the next 2 months to help assess whether detainees are allowed to meet with their attorneys in a confidential and regular manner. The facility was built this summer at a remote airstrip in the Florida Everglades. The detainees' federal lawsuit claims that their attorneys have to make an appointment to visit 3 days in advance, unlike at other immigration detention facilities where lawyers can just show up during visiting hours. That detainees are often transferred to other facilities after their attorneys had made an appointment to see them, and that scheduling delays have been so lengthy that detainees were unable to meet with attorneys before key deadlines. Federal courts routinely conduct site visits as a valid fact-finding tool, especially in cases involving conditions of confinement, the detainees' attorneys wrote in their request. But attorneys for the state of Florida strenuously objected to a visit, saying the federal judge doesn't have the authority to inspect a state facility, and a visit would pose significant security risks. It would also impose a large burden on a facility's staff and significantly interrupt the facility's operations, attorneys for the state of Florida said. As of Monday, the judge had not ruled on the request. You're listening to reading of articles from the Buffalo News for today, Tuesday, December the 23rd, on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are Lori and
Lita.
A quick programming note, this upcoming Thursday is Christmas Day. Due to that, the offices of the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service will be closed on both Christmas Day, and we're also going to be celebrating Boxing Day this year by being closed on Friday. Because of this, our program is going to be a little different. I'll go over it real quick. We're getting everything we can done recorded. If there's any reruns, we apologize in advance. But tomorrow night, Wednesday the 24th, at 10 o'clock, we're playing an old-time radio show. It's 3 hours, all of Christmas-themed old-time radio shows from our vault. At 9 o'clock on Christmas morning, you're opening your presents with your family. Tune in. You can listen to the news rebroadcast from Wednesday. At noon, while you're having lunch, while you're having fun with whatever gifts you got, tune in for some Merry Christmas. It's the stories and songs and traditions of Christmas. It's 2 hours. It's from noon until 2. At 4 o'clock, while you're sitting down for dinner, starting to wind down a little bit, tune in. We have our good friend, Captain John Luke Picard himself, Sir Patrick Stewart, reading A Christmas Carol. It goes from 4 to 6. And then at 10 o'clock, you're winding down, you're ready to go to sleep. Tune into our all-time radio special on Christmas Day with 3 hours of additional old-time radio Christmas stuff from our vault. On Friday morning, you might still be in the mood for Christmas, so we're playing the Guinness Book of Christmas from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. At 1 p.m., we have the Newsweek Birth of Jesus article. At 4 o'clock, we have from our friends at the International Association of Audio Information Services, some Christmas time in history, and then at 5 o'clock, we have their Christmas Carol. Stay with us for these readings and more throughout the Christmas holiday, and stay with us. Our Reading the Buffalo News will be continuing in just a moment.
And we'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Lori.
and Lita.
Instacart is ending its program that led to price confusion. In New York, Instacart said Monday that it's ending a program where some customers saw different prices for the same product ordered at the same time from the same store when using the delivery company's service. The program was meant to help grocers and other retailers learn more about what kinds of prices customers would pay for items, similar to how stores offer different prices for the same products at different locations. But it raised alarms after a report from Consumer Reports and 2 progressive advocacy groups, Groundwork Collaborative and More Perfect Union, said Instacart offered nearly 3 out of every 4 grocery items to shoppers at multiple prices in an experiment. At a time when families are working exceptionally hard to stretch every grocery dollars, those tests raised concerns, leaving some people questioning the prices they see on Instacart, the company said in a Monday blog post. That's not okay, especially for a company built on trust, transparency, and affordability. Retailers will continue to set their own prices on the delivery website, and they may still offer different prices at different brick-and-mortar locations, Instacart said, but from now on, Instacart will not support any items price testing services. Instacart said these services were neither dynamic pricing, a system where the price for something can go up when demand is high, nor surveillance pricing, where prices can be set based on a user's income, shopping history, or other personal information. Instead, the company said it was offered to customers at random. Some customers would simply see a slightly higher price for an item, while others would see a slightly lower price. The experiment by Consumer Reports and the 2 progressive advocacy groups, for example, found that Instacart customers saw 1 of 5 different prices for the same dozen of Lucerne eggs from a Safeway store in Washington, D.C. $3.99, $4.28, $4.59, $4.69, or $4.79. Instacart had been offering the price testing services to retailers since 2023. The company declined to say how many customers may have been affected, but it will end that service effective immediately. Last week, in a separate case, Instacart agreed to pay $60 million in customer refunds to settle federal allegations of deceptive practices. The Federal Trade Commission had accused Instacart of falsely advertising free deliveries and not clearly disclosing service fees, which add as much as 15% to an order and must be paid for by the customers. Instacart denied FTC allegations of wrongdoing and said it reached a settlement in order to move forward and focus on its business. Trust is earned through clarity and focus on its business. Trust is earned through clarity and
BTN of Oregon, a Christmas tree farm. Buy America, support America, his brother Tyler Stone chimed in from their farm in Salem. That is the message we need to get out, but our budget is low. Advertising is difficult for agricultural products, even those in high demand. Consumers might know a few brands at best, but not the thousands of farmers who produce for them. So for almost every fruit, vegetable, or animal, there is an organization dedicated to marketing it, funded by small fees paid by producers. These groups advertise, develop new recipes, buy a Super Bowl commercial for Mexican avocados, or in the case of raisins in the 1980s, created claymation characters and a television series. They hope these efforts will persuade consumers to buy more of their products. But most people aren't going to buy multiple Christmas trees, purchase them in July, or find new uses for them. So figuring out how to induce demand in a declining industry falls upon the shoulders of Marcia Gray, Executive Director of the Real Christmas Tree Board. The board's mission is to persuade Americans to buy live-cut trees, and its main point is that live-cut trees are real, while plastic trees stored in a box are fake. Consumers are not buying real Christmas trees in the numbers that they were 50 years ago, 40 years ago, Gray said. It is due to a lot of factors, I'm certain, but primarily we have an artificial tree competitor. The fight is daunting. According to the American Farm Bureau Federation, an agricultural lobbying organization, the value of imported artificial trees has doubled in the last decade, though that fell this year as fewer were imported because of tariffs on China. The United States has also 35% fewer acres dedicated to producing Christmas trees than it did 20 years ago. Gray has an advertising budget of less than $1 million annually, mostly spent on media awareness and some small online search campaigns, which is why the entire Christmas tree industry is so excited by Home Depot's latest ad. Its big Christmas commercial this year features a North Carolina Christmas tree farm and follows a young boy picking out a live-cut tree at one of its stores. Home Depot has spent about $10 million to air the commercial on national television over 1,000 times, according to iSpot, a television analytics company. It's more than just a transactional purchase. The way we look at Christmas trees, said Dan Stupiello, the Home Depot executive in charge of live goods. We try to create more of that festive environment.
Borrowing fight in city drags on. The legal battle between Mayor Christopher Scanlon and City Comptroller Barbara Miller Williams over borrowing money for capital projects will continue into next year. Miller Williams and her attorneys have filed a brief in their appeal of Scanlon's lawsuit over her office's refusal to borrow for the city's approved $110 million capital budget for the 2024-2025 season, meaning the parties will offer oral arguments to the court at the end of February. On behalf of the citizens and taxpayers of the City of Buffalo, my decision to appeal was made with careful consideration and a clear responsibility to safeguard the city's finances, Miller Williams said in a written statement Monday, announcing her latest legal filing. Counsel for Scanlon and Fillmore District Council member Mitchell Nowakowski previously filed a motion to lift a stay, which would force Miller Williams to borrow for projects approved in the $110 million 2024-2025 capital budget. The state's court's fourth department, the appeals division, ruled in November not to lift the stay immediately, but to expedite the appeal process. The comptroller's appeal recycles the same tired arguments that didn't convince Justice Kalikovo, said Terrence Connors and Andrew Debbins, attorneys representing Scanlon and Fillmore Council member Mitchell Nowakowski, who sued Miller Williams over the borrowing issue. It's a shame to waste taxpayer money on this appeal, especially when the announcements of the new administration concur with borrowing in line with the amounts proposed by the acting mayor. Scanlon became acting mayor in October 2024 after former Mayor Byron Brown resigned. Mayor-elect Sean Ryan will take office at the beginning of the year. Scanlon and Miller Williams were engaged in a months-long public battle over whether the city charter requires the comptroller to borrow the full amount of money approved by the mayor and the common council. Miller Williams maintains the city charter empowers her to veto any approved borrowing that she has deemed excessive. In September, State Supreme Court Justice Emilio Koliakovo sided against her and said that Miller Williams did not have the authority to go against the approved borrowing plan. The comptroller soon appealed. Scanlon and the council passed a $95 million capital budget in November for 2025-2026 season that again far exceeds the debt limit set by the comptroller's office of $28 million for the year. Scanlon and council members have argued that the comptroller's debt limit is advisory. Under state law, the city's current debt load is at about 10% of the total allowed. Ryan has said he agrees with Koliakovo's decision. He has said that he plans to use all options available to complete needed capital work as the city continues to dig out of its structural deficits, including increasing any borrowing.
And Republican Dan Gagliardo, who lost the race for Amherst supervisor, is setting his sights on a state Senate seat. On Monday, visitors to Dan Gagliardo for Amherst Town Supervisor found this Facebook page had a new name, Dan Gagliardo for Senate. 1 month after Gagliardo lost his campaign for Amherst Supervisor, the Republican small business owner announced his plan to run in a special election for state Senate. Gagliardo is joining the field of candidates vying to replace Democrat Sean Ryan, who is leaving the state Senate to become Buffalo's mayor on the 1st of January. Gagliardo said he believes issues such as fighting crime and lowering taxes carry over from the town contest to the state Senate election. And I think that's almost as important a continuation of what I started. And I'm hoping that I can finish it with special elections, Gagliardo said in an interview. The special election in the 61st State Senate District will be held in late winter. The heavily Democratic district includes the town of Amherst, the town and city of Tonawanda, Grand Island, Kenmore, Williamsville, and Northwest Buffalo. 2 Democrats have their eyes on the seat. Erie County Democrat Cherry Jeremy Zellner and Assemblymember John Rivera, a Democrat of Buffalo. Amherst Democrats say voters will send Gagliardo the same message in the special state Senate election that they did in the Amherst Town Supervisor race. I mean, he spent an awful lot of money, Amherst Democratic Chairman Chuck Eaton said. He thinks he did well. I mean, he lost. And look, it wasn't close. He was beaten. Governor Kathy Hochul, between January 1st and January 11th, must confirm Ryan's seat is vacant and schedule a special election to be held between 40 and 50 days later, likely in February, said Ralph Moore, the Erie County GOP Elections Commissioner. Political party leaders from the communities within the 61st Senate District will select their candidates for the special election once this occurs, Moore said. Democrats are choosing between Zellner, the influential party chair who is giving up his position as the county Democratic commissioner, and Rivera. Ryan has won his Senate seat by double-digit margins every election since his first run in 2020, and Democrats hold a near 2-to-1 enrollment advantage, 93,400 to 50,500, though there are more than 49,000 independent voters in the district. Gagliardo said he believes his performance in the supervisor's race, even in a losing effort, shows he's a strong candidate for state Senate. Amherst Democrats have a 15-point enrollment advantage among town voters, but Gagliardo lost his 6 points, 53 to 47% to Levin last month. Gagliardo, who owns the Diavolo retail and restaurant chain, announced his Senate campaign on Facebook on Monday morning and planned to hold a news conference later in the day. He said he realizes he's better known in Amherst than in other parts of the state Senate district, and I'm going to do as much as I possibly can in the next 6 weeks to get out of Tonawanda, to get out to Grand Island, into Buffalo, and let people know who I am and what I am.
A driver and victim identified in a fatal crash in Amherst. Erie County prosecutors on Monday released the name of the driver charged with killing a pedestrian and then fleeing the scene. Jennifer A. Orowitz, 57, of Cheektowaga, has been charged with vehicular manslaughter, leaving the scene of a fatal motor vehicle accident, and driving while intoxicated, the district attorney's office said in a news release. The crash happened at about 6 p.m. Saturday on Kensington Avenue between Harlem Road and Concord Place. Amherst police on Monday identified the victim as Cynthia Sitterly, 70, of Cheektowaga. On Sunday, Amherst Town Justice Ann Nichols set Ortiz's bail at $25,000 cash, $55,000 bond, or $250,000 partially secured bond. Prosecutors asked for Ortiz to be held without bail. Ortiz was transferred into the custody of the Erie County Sheriff's Office, which no longer lists her as being in custody. Police found Ortiz and her vehicle after the crash at her Cheektowaga home, Amherst police previously said.
And you are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 14 minutes past the hour. And in a good story here, Ira Schwab, S-H-A-B, 105 years old Navy vet, survived Pearl Harbor attack. And he passed away on the 20th of December and was actually born on the 4th of July. How amazing is that?
That is awesome. Yeah.
He's a World II Navy veteran, Ira Ike Schaub, one of the dwindling members of survivors of the 1941 Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor, has died, and he was 105. Daughter Kimberly Heinrichs said Schaub died at home early Saturday in the presence of her and her husband. With his passing, there remains only about a dozen survivors of the surprise attack, which killed just over 2,400 troops and propelled the United States into the war. Schaub was a sailor of just 21 at the time of the attack, and for decades he rarely spoke about the experience. But in recent years, aware that the core of survivors was dwindling, the centenarian made a point of traveling from his home in Beaverton, Oregon, to the annual observance at the Hawaii military base. To pay honor to the guys, that didn't make it, he said in 2023. For last year's commemoration, Schaub spent weeks building up the strength to be able to stand and salute, but this year he did not feel well enough to attend. Born on Independence Day in 1920 in Chicago, Schaub was the eldest of three brothers. He joined the Navy at 18, following in the footsteps of his father, he said in a February interview for Pacific Historic Parks. On what began as a peaceful Sunday on the 7th of December 1941, Schaub, who played the tuba and the USS Dobbins band, was expecting a visit from his brother, a fellow service member assigned to a nearby naval radio station. Schaub had just showered and donned a clean uniform when he heard a call for fire rescue. He went topside and saw another ship, the USS Utah, capsizing. Japanese planes roaring through the air. We were pretty startled and scared to death, Schaub recalled in 2023. We didn't know what to expect, and we knew that if anything happened to us, that would be it. He scurried back below deck to grab boxes of ammunition and joined the daisy chain of sailors feeding shells to an anti-aircraft gun above. His ship lost 3 sailors, according to Navy records. 1 was killed in action, and 2 died later of fragment wounds from a bomb that struck the stern. All had been manning an anti-aircraft gun. Schaub spent most of the war with the Navy in the Pacific, going to the New Hebrides, now known as Vanuatu, and then the Mariana Islands and Okinawa, Japan. After the war, he studied aerospace engineering and worked on the Apollo spaceflight program, as an electrical engineer for General Dynamics, helping send astronauts to the moon. Schaub's son also joined the Navy and is a retired commander. Speaking at a 2022 ceremony, Schaub asked people to honor those who served at Pearl Harbor. Remember what they're here for. Remember and honor those who are left. They did a hell of a job, he said, and those who are still here, dead or alive.
We certainly thank Ira for his service, as well as the service of all our troops and their veterans. And in sports, Sabres Senators meet in Battle of East Beasts, Ottawa. December 23rd, the Buffalo Sabres posted a 7-1 win over the New York Islanders in the UBS Arena that snapped a 13-game winless streak. I think today's the 23rd, so that must have been on the 22nd. Exactly 1 year later, things have suddenly become quite different around this franchise. Oh, that was 2024. Sorry. For starters, of course, General Manager Kevin Adams was fired last week and replaced by Senior Advisor Jarmo Kekalainen. I had trouble with his name last week. The Sabres are 3-0 since Jarmo took over, and their 6-game winning streak is the longest running one in the NHL. On Tuesday night in Canadian Tire Center, the Sabres, 17-14-4, can pull even closer in the playoff race when they meet the Ottawa Senators, 18-13-4, in a battle of the East's 2 hottest teams. Last year at this time, Buffalo was 11-19-4. Another Buffalo victory on Tuesday would give the Sabres their best run since their 10-gamer early in the 2018-2019 season, and if it comes in regulation time, the Sabres would move ahead of the Senators in the East via tiebreakers. Ottawa has won 4 in a row and outscored opponents 19-8 over that stretch. The Sens have back-to-back 6-goal games over the weekend in a home win over Chicago and Sunday's 6-2 thumping of Boston in TD Garden. The Sabres, who took Monday off, enter the game 3 points out of the East wildcard slots, which were held as of Monday by Philadelphia, New Jersey, and Boston. They also entered Monday 3 points behind Tampa Bay for third place in the Atlantic Division, pending the Lightning's game against St. Louis. It just comes down to completing every night, being consistent, winger Zach Benson said after Sunday's 3-1 win in New Jersey. Our belief is super high. It's really high. We know the skill we have in this room. We're getting comfortable playing with leads, making plays under pressure, added winger Peyton Krebs. We're a lot less choppy throwing pucks away and a lot more crisp. The goaltending has been stellar on this winning streak. Alex Lyon has 5 of the wins, and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen stopped 26 of 27 shots on Sunday. Buffalo's goalies are rolling a 1.97 goals against average and a .931 save percentage during this winning streak. Luukkonen got his first win of the season on the road, where he had been 0-4-1 with a 3.97 over .843 stat line. I felt I had to be better, Luukkonen said. It really didn't matter if it was home or away. I had to be better. We got a streak going here, and the guys have been unbelievable. The Sabres have won 5 straight games over the Senators and are 8-2 in the last 10 meetings, including an 8-4 whipping in KeyBank Center on October the 15th. The game will mark the return of center Josh Norris to Ottawa, where he played parts of 6 seasons before being traded to the Sabres in March. Norris scored his fourth goal of the season Sunday and has 10 points in 9 games. Former Sabres player Dylan Cozens, acquired by the Sens in the trade, has 11 goals and 16 assists in 35 games with a -9 rating. That's the worst among Ottawa's forwards. Pucks hitting the net. Benson had no goals in his first 18 games this season, but his game winner in the second period in New Jersey was his 3rd in the last 5 games. I'm still super confident, he said. I just stuck with it, and it's good I'm finding the back of the net of late. Krebs, who had a career-high 10 goals last season, finally got his first of the year Sunday in his 35th game. Corralling at Tage Thompson miss off the end boards. I'm not sure what all of that meant. Krebs pounded home an empty netter with a 2:01 left. I was hoping it went in first for Tomer, Krebs said of Thompson, who lost a 6-game goal-scoring streak. But it was a nice, perfect bounce from me, and I slammed that thing probably through the net. Shootout stats. Just in case this one goes to a shootout, it's notable the Sabres and Senators are both 3-0 in the skills competitions thus far this season, behind only Anaheim, 4-0. The shootout goal by Sabres winger Jack Quinn on Saturday against the New York Islanders marked the 7th of his career in 12 attempts. His 58.3% conversion rate is the highest among all Sabres skaters, with 10 or more attempts since shootout began in 2005. It's just a gift he has, Sabre coach Lindy Ruff said. I think shooting has always been a passion of his. If there's one guy you always see in the shooting area of the ice, he's the one back there shooting. He's a guy who loves to shoot, and I've been around players like that. He's pretty good at hitting his mark. The Islanders' victory allowed the Sabres to snap the team's tie for the all-time NHL lead in shootout victories. Buffalo improved to 96-83, while New York fell to 95-93. The Sabres also tied Nashville for the lead in home shootout wins with 51.
And switching over to the Bills from Jay Skursky, catching heat. When Bills need outside receivers, there should be a show of hands. We're not breaking any new ground here, but the Buffalo Bills wide receivers didn't give them much Sunday against the Cleveland Browns. That's been a familiar refrain this season. Outside of slot receiver Khalil Shakir, the rest of the Bills' other 4 wide receivers, Joshua Palmer, Tyrell Shavers, Brandon Cooks, and Mecole Hardman, finished with 2 catches for 23 yards combined. We're going to keep working, quarterback Josh Allen said. I can help to put our guys in better situations, give them better opportunities. Anytime you can run the ball with James Cook, and with the success we're having earlier, we'll continue to do that. It's going to open things up. Just keep trusting it. That's hard to do at the moment. The production from Buffalo's outside receivers, or lack thereof more accurately, is astounding. Dating to Week 12 against Pittsburgh, Buffalo's boundary receivers, Cooks, Palmer, Shavers, Keon Coleman, Gabe Davis, Elijah Moore, who is no longer on the team, have combined for 16 catches. 159 total yards, and 0 touchdowns. The work continues, Bill coach Sean McDermott said. We've got to continue to improve as a football team if we want to continue to win moving forward. The game plan Sunday against the Browns involved Allen getting the ball out of his hands quick against a defensive line that featured Myles Garrett. Beyond that, though, at this point, there isn't much more that can be said about the wide receiver room. To borrow a phrase from McDermott, coaches can spin the dial all they want, but it's increasingly unlikely they're going to land on a plan that produces drastically different results from the ones they've already experienced. It's a fair question and an accurate question. We haven't had probably the production that we all would want, McDermott said. I'm sure those guys would say the same. Nobody works harder. That group is a group of hard-working guys. The front office added to the group by claiming Cook's off waivers, but he has a difficult start in his Bills career. Cook has now dropped perfectly thrown balls from Allen in back-to-back games, and in 5 games, Cook has 1 catch for 13 yards, so he's got more drops than catches. Shavers had 4 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown in the win over Tampa Bay in Week 11, and since then he's been targeted 3 times, making 2 catches for 37 yards. Coleman has sat 3 times this season, once for disciplinary reason and twice as a healthy inactive. After making 8 catches for 112 yards and a touchdown in Week 1 against Baltimore, he responded with 24 catches for 243 yards in the next 15 games. Coleman's role in the team moving forward is very much in question. He might get another opportunity this season because, let's be real, why not? Davis has been a healthy inactive the last 2 games. While his production in 4 games, 7 catches for 88 yards, hasn't been prolific by any means, he's at least had trust of Allen, which is worth something. He should probably be active moving forward. And Palmer has been a total mess as a free agent addition. He played a team-leading 35 snaps at receiver against the Browns, which was 70% of the offensive total, but was targeted just 1 time, resulting in a catch for 2 yards. Palmer has run routes on 73.9% of dropbacks during games he's been active, but is averaging just 0.12 yards per route run. He has not recorded a target in the red zone or in the end zone. Dead horse. This wide receiver room for a contending team is so insane, wrote Matt Harmon, a football analyst for Yahoo, who has done extensive work evaluating wide receivers after Sunday's game. Credit to coaching staff for figuring out other ways to move the ball. Shakir has provided steady production from the slot. The running backs have become more involved in the passing game. The tight ends have all contributed. Dawson Knox's touchdown drop Sunday notwithstanding. All of that has put a Band-Aid over the gaping hole the Bills have at boundary receiver.
And on page C7, we have a beautiful 1/3 page full color picture of 7 lovely young women. And they are the 2025 Coaches All-Western New York Girls Cross Country First Team. The 2025 Coaches All-Western New York First Team was selected by region coaches. Runner of the year is Melia Kupchenko of Williamsville North, number 12. Favorite memory from the season was winning the Section 6 title for the first time. She's a 3-sport athlete, also competing in indoor and outdoor track and field. She holds school records in the 400 meters, 600, 800, 1,000, and 1,500 meters. Personal best is in the 5K is 17:24, and personal best in 3 miles is 17:02. She won the Division I state title crown in the 800 meters just 2 years ago, and she will continue her career at Wake Forest. The first team, Aubrey Conti from Frontier, number 9. She ran a personal best of 18:40.15 at the Alden Bulldog race. Liked making the state championships with her teammates, and she has also advanced to state meets in indoor as well as outdoor track. Peyton Fisher from Frontier, number 10. Her season best times were 18:20 for 3 miles and 18:30 for the 5K. In the state meet, she finished 30th in Class A with a time of 18:30 in the 5K. The team qualified for state for the first time in 25 years. Eden Hillman from Newfane, number 8, appreciated ending the season at the state championships with a time of 19:09.5, a personal best good enough to place 14th in the Class C race. She is an undefeated Niagara Orleans League champion for the 2nd straight season, is excited to officially begin her high school career starting next year. Emma Lewis, Southwestern number 11, ran a personal best at Evangola State Park, 17:38, to qualify for nationals in Alabama. Placed first as the Red Dragon Invitational and McQuaid Invitational, and is the CCA Runner of the Year. Bella Rose Milligan, West Seneca West, ran 18:33 to place 5th overall at the ECIC Championships and placed 7th at the McQuaid Invitational and Alden Bulldog Stampede. Was 3rd in Class A at the ECIC Championships, 7th overall at sectionals, 5th in Class A at sectionals and a state qualifier. This was her first year running competitively. Charlotte Winicki from Lancaster, number 9. At the Alden Invite, she placed 3rd with a 5K time of 18:09. She felt accomplished qualifying for the state championships with teammate Mallory Adams. I am very thankful for my friends and coaches for helping me become the athlete that I am, Winicki said. And finally, Shannon Zugelder from Star Point, number 12. Highlights of the season were placing 9th at the McQuaid race and winning the Section 6 Class B title 3 times. School record in 3 miles is 17:17, and in the 5K, 17:43. She's a 4-time ECIC 3 champion and attended the state meet 5 times. Favorite moment was breaking the school record in the 5K at the Alden Bulldog Invite, and she will continue her career at Ole Miss.
And you are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 30 minutes past the hour. And let's move over to asking Eric. Dear Eric, my husband and I have been married for almost 32 years. He's retired military and works as a civilian. All those years as military, he wore the standard uniform plus boots. Well, some time back, he visited Texas and bought some cowboy boots. Mind you, he had always been the non-clothes horse guy, simple jeans and shoes. Well, now some kind of urban cowboy switch was turned on and he has gone full-on cowboy. We're talking wearing boots with his work clothes, including collar tips and cowboy hat. I'm perplexed. The cowboy aesthetic is not my thing and honestly looks out of place where we live and his work. It almost feels costumey to me, and I don't know what to do. It's awkward to go anywhere in my casual clothes accompanied by my rootin' tootin' dressed husband. How can I gently say anything? He would never comment on my clothes, and I want to respect his choices, but this feels so awkward. Should I be concerned about his mental judgment? He has now ordered 3 pairs of boots and wears them more frequently. Help! Signed, Rootin' Tootin' Trouble. Dear Rootin' Tootin', let him get his yeehaw on in peace. I understand your confusion and agree that it's a little eccentric, but we're all allowed our harmless eccentricities. It sounds like he's exploring a new form of self-expression. Maybe he got really into the television show Yellowstone. Maybe he just likes to feel the cowboy boots. It's all fine. Try to lead with curiosity if you talk with him about it. Curiosity can be hard, I know, when the truth is we just don't agree with another person's choice. But see if you can leave your opinion aside and ask him what's motivating this change in style. If he feels your genuine interest, he may share something that surprises you. Maybe there's no big idea behind the change, but it's always enlightening to hear about the things that excite others. At the very least, it'll give you more insight into your spouse's inner life. Dear Eric, my daughter was 10 when my wife and I split. Soon after, my ex moved to Vermont with my daughter to live with her new boyfriend. When I phoned, she frequently would not let me talk with my daughter. My ex used our daughter as a means to inflict pain on me. She badmouthed me to her and all our common friends to the point that I was told to leave the church we both had been attending. My daughter has said she never heard my side of the divorce. She is now an adult, and my ex continues to try to monopolize time, even hiring her to work for her. What is painful is my daughter generally does not reach out to me. I have to initiate the connection. My daughter recently had a child. When I want to see her and my granddaughter, it's like making an appointment, whereas my daughter frequently visits my mother. She has expressed to me that her relationship with her mother is codependent, and she feels her mother is playing mind games with her, her own words, but nothing changes. The situation is very painful as I do not feel like I am important in her life, something my ex fostered. I want to talk with my daughter, but I'm afraid it will create hard feelings. I even think it might be less painful to end the relationship with her. I know this sounds like I'm playing the victim, but I honestly do not know what to say or do. I keep reaching out to my daughter, but it wounds me to hear how much time she spends with her mother. Signed, Neglected Father. Dear Father, as difficult as it may be, it will help you to start thinking about her relationship with you as completing separately from her relationship with her mother and your relationship with her mother. Right now, there's a lot of comparison running through your head. This is understandable, but it's only going to deepen your pain. You and your daughter have been through a lot. It sounds like some of it wasn't fair or wasn't right, and so you need to start over. This is going to take time. But if you approach her with openness and clarity about your desire to connect on her terms, it is possible. Don't end the relationship. Instead, try saying something like, I'd love to be in your life more. I know the divorce had an impact on you, and we can talk about that if and when you need to. But I think that we can build something new, and that has meaning for both of us. Is that something you would like?
And we have an additional interesting obituary today. Betty Reed Soskin was born September 22nd of 1921, and she died December 21st of 2025. At 104, she was at 104 years, I should say, she's the nation's oldest park ranger. Betty Reed Soskin, the National Park Service's oldest active ranger who helped shape the creation of a park, honoring the millions of workers in World War II defense jobs, among them women like her who persevered while facing racial discrimination, died Sunday at her home in Richmond, California at 104. Her death was confirmed in a statement that her family posted on her social media account. In 1942, when women joined the war effort by working in the defense industry and other related roles, as portrayed in Rosie the Riveter posters, Soskin sought to do her part in the Bay Area by seeking work at the Boilermakers Union, which supplied much of the shipbuilding workforce in the port of Richmond near San Francisco. But the union, which was segregated, relegated her and the other black women in its ranks to the auxiliary wing. That's hard to say. And so for the rest of the war, Soskin sorted index cards at the Union Hall in the city, miles from the bustling yards that sent warships to the Pacific, a task that left her with the feeling of humiliation. I never had a sense of being anyone other than pushing papers, she told the San Francisco Chronicle in 2007. I wasn't even always sure who the enemy was. But she was able to draw on her World War II experiences in later years. In 2000, while working as an aide to Dion Aroner, a California Assembly member, she landed a seat at the table in planning for the launch of the Rosie the Riveter World War II Homefront National Historic Park in Richmond. I was the only person of color in the room, Soskin told Newsweek in 2020. And as I began to introduce my part of the work, it was very clear that many of the stories of Richmond during the war were not being told. Soskin was made a consultant to the park in 2003 and signed on as a ranger there in 2007 when she was a young 85. She took visitors on narrated bus trips and shared the history of the park's many sites and was remembered especially for the talk she gave at the park's theater where she recounted the lives of people of color who faced racial discrimination at home during the war. Because of Betty, we made sure we had African American scholars review our films and exhibits. Tom Leatherman, the park superintendent, told Glamour in 2018 when the magazine named Soskin as Women of the Year in the field of culture. We also made sure we were looking out for other often forgotten stories, Japanese American, Latin American, American Indian, and LGBTQ narratives. All of those were equally important. In addition to her own wartime experiences, Soskin told of how thousands of Japanese people living on the West Coast, many of them American citizens, had been transported by the government to inland internment camps. In 2009, Soskin was invited by her congressional representative, George Miller, as a guest on the National Mall to witness President Barack Obama's inauguration. In 2015, Soskin introduced Obama during the nationally televised Christmas tree lighting in Washington, where he presented her with a commemorative coin stamped with the presidential seal. Betty Charbonnet was born September 21st, 1921 in Detroit, where her family lived briefly before returning to their home in New Orleans. Her father, Dorson Lewis Charbonnet, who like his father worked as a builder, and her mother, Lottie Bro Allen, and had African, French, and Spanish roots. Following a devastating flood that ravaged their home, Betty, at only 6, and her family moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. After graduating from high school, Betty married Mel Reed, and in 1945 they founded Reed's Records in Berkeley. It featured jazz, rhythm and blues, and gospel recordings, and was one of the first black-owned record shops in California. Mel and his uncle Paul Reed became highly successful music promoters. While raising their 4 children in the mostly white Berkeley suburb of Walnut Creek, Soskin and her husband encountered racial hostility, and they even received death threats. In the late 1960s, Soskin held fundraisers through the Unitarian Universalist Church to support the Black Panthers and delivered the proceeds to Kathleen and Eldridge Cleaver, 2 of the group's central figures. She was a delegate to the 1972 Democratic National Convention that nominated Senator George McGovern of South Dakota to face President Richard Nixon in what became his election to a second term. Soskin also wrote songs in the 1960s and 70s, performing them on her guitar throughout the Bay Area. Soskin and Reed divorced in 1972, and she married William Soskin, a psychology professor at the University of California, Berkeley. That marriage also ended in divorce. She took over management of Reed's Records in 1978 after her first husband's health declined. Working to revive the second store's fortunes, Betty Soskin pressured Berkeley City Hall to clean up the drug problem that had overtaken Sacramento Street, where Reed's Records had been located. That led her to working in City Hall herself as a legislative aide to council member Don Jelinek. She also worked with Berkeley's mayor at the time, Gus Newport, to help build low-income housing. The record store closed in 2019. In 2003, she learned to use a computer, and she began to blog, which became a basis for her memoir, Sign My Name to Freedom, edited by her cousin, J. Douglas Allen Taylor, a journalist and author. She recalled a searing episode in 1950s when she entered a suburban diner in the Walnut Hill area with 3 of her children around 5 p.m. After a very long time, the waitress came over, she wrote. She announced with a grin, "You'll have to get out of here, we're closing." The rest of the customers had gone silent. Some were obviously enjoying my misery. It was the dinner hour. The place could not be closing. Soskin returned with her children to her car. This was before the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the establishment of racially shared restrooms and drinking fountains, she wrote. But this was not Mississippi, but California. How could this be? Information on Soskin survivors was not immediately available.
And a proposal has been approved to aid the Chiefs' new stadium effort. Kansas lawmakers approved a proposal Monday to help pay for a new stadium for the Kansas City Chiefs, which is expected to lure one of the NFL's iconic franchises across the state line from Missouri and replace popular but aging Arrowhead Stadium. The Legislative Coordinating Council, which includes the state's top lawmakers, voted unanimously inside a packed room at the state capitol to allow for star bonds to be issued to cover up to 70% of the cost of the stadium and accompanying district. The bonds would be paid off with state sales and liquor tax revenues generated in a defined area around it. The council meeting was attended by Chiefs owner Clark Hunt and team president Mark Donovan, along with other officials. They are expected to announce their intention to move later Monday from their longtime home in Kansas City, Missouri. That would have been yesterday. Kansas Governor Laura Kelly has called a news conference for 3 p.m. local time to present a major economic development announcement for the state of Kansas and the Kansas City region. She will be joined by legislators and Kansas City area representatives. The most likely landing place for the Chiefs is Kansas City, Kansas, near the Kansas Speedway and a retail and entertainment district known as the Legends. The area is also home to Children's Mercy Park, the home of MLS club Sporting Kansas City. The move by the Chiefs would be a massive blow to Missouri's lawmaker and Governor Mike Kehoe, who has been working on their own package to prevent a second NFL franchise in a decade from leaving their borders. The Rams left St. Louis for LA in part due to their inability to secure funding to help replace the dome at America's Center. Kehoe has backed a special legislative session in June to authorize bonds covering up to 50% of the cost of new or renovated stadiums, plus up to $50 million of tax credits for each stadium and unspecified aid from local government. Quinton Lucas, the mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, has been working to keep both the Chiefs and Kansas City Royals on the Missouri side of the state line. He has called a news conference for later Monday regarding sports team developments. The chief originally planned an $800 million renovation of Arrowhead Stadium in a joint effort with the Royals, who are similarly planning to build a new facility to replace Kauffman Stadium. The facilities sit a couple of hundred yards across from the parking lot from each other, and both teams have leased with Jackson County, Missouri, that expires in January 2031.
Okay, and Kathleen Parker writes, activist Lay's last hope may come from an unexpected figure. The sham trial of media tycoon and Democratic activist Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong ended with an 855-page guilty verdict. Sentencing, which is expected next year, could mean the 78-year-old will die, as he has lived since his arrest 5 years ago, in a cell the size of a closet, in solitary confinement, with only his Catholic faith for comfort. He faces a life sentence which many fear won't take long. Lai, a diabetic, is ailing, and he's diminishing by the day. His daughter, Claire Lai, described her once larger-than-life father at a news briefing on December 15th in Washington, D.C. Having lost significant weight, he suffers from heart disease and infections, she said, and is losing his vision and his hearing. When she visits him, she sees that his nails and teeth are rotting. In the courtroom where he was paraded before spectators for 156 days, Lai appeared pale. Some days he couldn't stand or walk. This image contrasts with the robust billionaire who arrived in Hong Kong as a child stowaway and grew up to become a successful businessman, creating the Apple daily newspaper where Lai promoted free speech and the rule of law. China had promised to protect such freedoms when Britain handed over Hong Kong in 1997. But communist regimes aren't heralded for commitments to truth, justice, and liberty for all. Thus, China imposed a national security law on Hong Kong in June of 2020, following massive pro-democracy protests. The law criminalized secession, subversion, and collusion with foreign forces. Lai was charged with conspiracy to collude with foreign forces and sedition. Lai did nothing of the sort, though he did once meet with Representative Nancy Pelosi and then Vice President Mike Pence. The activities for which he was charged, however, were before the national security law's imposition. It was a test case, Jonathan Price, a barrister on Lai's international legal team, said at last week's briefing. The law was brought in to challenge people engaged in peaceful protest. It was essential that this showcase event end with a conviction. The court's rendering, he said, is a testament to the death of the rule of the law in Hong Kong. Lai is China's warning to others who would dare speak freely against Beijing. Leaders in the United States and Britain, among others, have urged for Lai's release for humanitarian reasons, but Beijing has not budged. I would argue China has made its point. Hong Kong's Democratic Party disbanded a day before Lai's verdict. To some readers, Lai's persecution may seem none of our business. Even Britain, where Lai is a citizen, has been slow to act on his behalf. President Trump proved the more reliable advocate, mentioning Lai's plight during recent trade talks with China. Lai's fate should be a global concern. Sadly, Lai's suffering seems to have escaped most people's attention, while China's influence is vast, and it's growing. Its tentacles are reaching around the globe through technology, investments, acquisitions, and not least through its massive Belt and Road Initiative. Launched in 2013, the BRI is modeled after the ancient Silk Road and aims to create trade routes by land and by sea. The original goal was to physically connect Asia to Europe, but in the decade since, it has expanded to Africa as well as Latin America. In the U.S., Chinese companies have bought 384,000 acres of agricultural land and Smithfield Foods, the nation's largest pork producer, raising concerns in D.C. that China might have control over these properties, especially since many of these purchases are near sensitive sites, including military installations. At least Chinese expats working in the U.S. will have little trouble adapting to the current government's fashionable posture of hating the press. Maybe instead they'll begin to appreciate our freedoms, all of which start with speech and end when speech is censored or controlled. Les Ole crime were fealty to freedom, commitment to the Catholic Church, and the unflinching courage to remain in Hong Kong with fellow freedom fighters to face his jailers rather than jump ship when he could have. Today, his only hope for release comes ironically from a man who shares China's disdain for the press. Trump and China still have a few trade details to work out. Let's hope that one of them is Lay's freedom.
And what to know about dueling offers to buy Warner Brothers? Warner Brothers told its shareholders that it believes a buyout offer from Netflix is superior and urged them to reject a hostile takeover bid from Paramount Skydance. A Warner Brothers merger with either company would alter the landscape in Hollywood and face intense scrutiny from U.S. regulators, as it would impact movie making, consumer streaming platforms, and, in Paramount's case, a major source of news for millions of people. The competing offers set the stage for combining some of the most beloved entertainment properties, and Netflix's vast library includes Stranger Things and Squid Game, while the much smaller Paramount owns its Hollywood studio and major TV networks like CBS and MTV. Both covet Warner, which owns Warner Brothers Pictures, HBO, and Harry Potter franchise. Whichever media company it is ultimately secures Warner controls the calculus of the streaming war and so much more, said Mike Prolix, Vice President and Research Director at research firm Forrester. Here's what to know about the three players and what the bids mean for the entertainment industry. A look at the offers. CEO Dave Zaslav sought offers for Warner Brothers Discovery since at least October, when he said the company might be open to selling all or part of its business. Paramount said it submitted 6 proposals to Warner over a 12-week period before its offer was rejected in favor of Netflix. So Paramount decided to go straight to Warner shareholders with a bid it says is worth about $79.9 billion, or $30 per share in cash. Paramount, unlike Netflix, also offered to buy Warner's cable assets. Paramount CEO Larry Ellison said the offer is worth about $18 billion more in cash than the competing cash and stock bid from Netflix. The Paramount deal includes help from investors such as President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and funds controlled by the government of Saudi Arabia. Okay, keep your opinion out, leader. And Qatar, according to a regulatory filing. Netflix offered a combination of cash and stock valued at $27.75 per Warner share. Its offer values Warner at $72 billion, excluding debt, but it did not bid on Warner's own networks such as CNN and Discovery. Before Paramount's bid, the Netflix deal was expected to close in the next 12 to 18 months after Warner completes its previously announced separation of its cable operations. Matthew Dolgan, senior equity analyst at research firm Morningstar, said there are still many unknowns, including whether Netflix will now sweeten its bid. But he said a competing offer makes it more likely Warner eventually will be acquired. With Paramount now also being involved formally with an offer to shareholders, it's even more likely to us that Warner gets acquired because it's no longer a single decision that may or may not hinge on regulatory approval. And of course, Trump weighed in. Another wild card would be Trump. He weighed in on the deal, saying Netflix offered to buy Warner could be a problem because of the potential size of the audience. The Republican president said he will be involved in the decision about whether the federal government should approve the deal. Paramount CEO is the son of Oracle founder Larry Ellison, a Trump ally. Federal regulators under Trump approved Paramount's $8 billion merger with Skydance, but scrutiny awaits on the Netflix offer. State or federal regulators could be most concerned about the massive size of a combined Netflix and Warner subscription service. Netflix is already the world's largest streaming service. That's less of a concern with the Paramount deal because its streaming service is smaller and has a smaller international footprint than Netflix. Still, regulators may raise red flags over the combination of the Paramount and Warner film and television studios because relatively few of those remain, Dahlgren said.
You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for today, Tuesday, December the 23rd, Christmas Eve. We read from the Buffalo News Live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m., and we rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, you can call 716-821-5555. That is 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been Lori and
Lita.
Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you have a wonderful holiday week.
Merry Christmas.
Hello, this is Marian Heatherly, Community Engagement Coordinator for your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, and I'd like to talk to you as another year comes to a close. We've been reflecting on what we've accomplished in 2025 and what needs to be done in the new year, and you, our listeners, are at the heart of everything. The most important message we want to share this holiday season is thank you to all of our listeners who have supported radio reading in 2025 by listening, by making a donation, by attending an event, by spreading the word about us, by connecting a new listener with us. You're incredibly important to us as we review our accomplishments of the past year and plan for the future, so we can keep our programming free for everyone who needs it and reach more people who would benefit. On behalf of the entire team at Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, may the joys of the holiday season be with you all.
If you're worried about food, heating assistance, or other basic needs for your household, help is available. Call 211 for local food pantries, meal services, and other supports in your neighborhood. That's 211. Available 24 hours a day, every day, with free and confidential referrals. Get the help you need today. If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,